Hello, Sinbad Moss. I'm the kind of moth you'd like to be. Welcome to the Writer's Triangle, Sinbad Moss podcast about all things publishing and books. Today we are here with Dana Hammer, author of The Campbell's Guide to Fasting and the series of books that is around Athena and my best friend Athena and Fanny Fitzpatrick. And today, Dana, today.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are things going?
Not bad. Can't complain. Not on fire, so that's good.
Yeah, that is good. It's always great when we're not
Yeah,
burning. We're not having to be too concerned about it as well.
yeah.
Are you feeling excited about the release of Fanny Fitzpatrick and the Sirens?
I'm super excited about this one. This is my favorite in the Fanny Fitzpatrick series, so I'm really excited for everyone to get to read it.
That's awesome to hear. So let's jump into it. Why is it your favorite? Or if you could go into that a little bit without being too spoilery, I guess.
Sure. Well, I can tell you that there's sirens in it, and they're very cool characters. I wanted to incorporate some other types of mythology into the series, and this was a really fun way to do it, especially because if you've read the first books, you know that Fanny's big dream is to be a singer. So when she gets recruited by sirens to be a potential siren, it's kind of a dream come true for her. So it was fun to write.
Yeah, I definitely felt the excitement of Fanny with that kind of her dream being used as a part of the story to push her into the direction of engaging with the sirens and kind of having that world building in a sense of, people with your talent often end up in this part of mythology, right? That's unlocking another aspect to it. And I like that take on the sirens as well.
Thank you.
Uh, so when it comes to writing it, did you find that with your excitement with it, that it was easier to write than the previous books, or do you find that you had to think about a bit to really integrate it? What was that experience like?
I would say it was not as easy as the first one, but it was easier than the second one because I was definitely excited about the topic, and I really loved the new characters that I got to introduce. But it was, it's longer, and also I feel like the plot is definitely a little more complicated, and it tackles some more grown-up moral issues, I would say. So in that respect, I would say it was a little more difficult, but definitely fun and worth it.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear with the excitement that you had with it, right? And I did notice that when you're writing it, that it tackles some topics that are a bit more, I guess, worldly, we could say,
Yeah.
than some of the previous books, right? And did you go into it planning on having it tackle those topics, or did it kind of evolve as you were writing the story? What was the development there?
Well, it definitely evolved as I wrote the story. I don't think I set out at first to make it more adult, but based on what I wanted to happen with her character, it had to be more adult. Because for the other two books, she's been kind of the outcast because she doesn't have any magic power. She's not a goddess. She doesn't have a lot of money. She's from a working class background. And so I wanted her to be tempted by by the ability to become something magical, to experience the extraordinary, and to have something of her own. So, and that's really kind of a grown up thing. That's not really little kid stuff. So I think that the plot had to age up a little to deal with that.
That makes a lot of sense, but I also think that overall, from the development of a character and development of a story, she is getting older as the story progresses. So it makes sense as well that maybe some of the topics become more, I guess, also age up with her as she has these experiences and grows as a person, right?
Absolutely.
And so with this development of, going from who she was in the first book to now, would you say that you were most excited about writing Fanny's development as a character, or were you more excited about introducing the new characters in the form of the Sirens?
Both, honestly. I mean, Fanny's just a great character. I love being in her head. Um, and I'm always excited to see how my characters grow and change. But once I introduced the new characters, I really loved them too. And I would say it's probably equal excitement about both of them. Yeah.
That that makes a lot of sense to me. I think that if I were to choose a character that I was excited about, I really enjoyed the writing of Mara
Oh, okay.
personally,
Yeah, I
but
like Mara too.
I think they're all great. But I think that Mara's characterization really brought me into it, and I found it really interesting personally.
Yeah, I liked her too. I like the rock star who's actually secretly a siren and has this whole double agent thing going on. She's fun.
Yeah, and I think that that uh, depiction, right, of the double life in particular is it's a common thing that we see in a lot of books, even with like Athena kind of has that double life experience of being a goddess and also being, a kid in school. But
Right.
it's a theme that is always fun to see done with something new.
Yeah.
And so I personally, I really enjoyed that.
Well, thank you.
When it comes to the theme in My Best Friend Athena and in uh, Fanny Fitzpatrick and the Brother Problem, we dealt with different issues, and they've kind of grown in terms of the issues that they talked about. Because before it was bullying, then it was, excess and family and the working class, and now we're looking at something that gets even bigger with looking at, environmental impact and things like that talked about in the book a bit more, right? And the
Hmm.
idea you can have good ideas, but then the things that you're doing about them aren't, and
Right.
that be kind of the gray areas sometimes that happen, or how people justify the use ends justifying the means, and that becomes a conversation topic, right?
For sure.
Uh, with that, and with Fanny coming into her own as a character and standing out as a character that has her own thing and that draw and that appeal of originality and that struggle of finding your own in a place where you're surrounded by people that you find personally impressive.
Hmm.
That's something that I personally kind of relate to as well, with wanting to, because my parents are both amazing people, really, really excellent, and I sometimes wonder, when I was younger, where do I fit in this? How can I also be excellent when they shine so brightly, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so it appealed to me as well, and I think that there will be a lot of people that find that appealing too.
Yeah. And I think we all feel that way to some degree, right? Like we all have people in our lives who we feel like we can never measure up.
Yeah, and I think that that was very well depicted with Fanny, and I do think that her development in the story is wonderful. Sorry,
Great.
I'm such a fan of your work, and I'm a really
Oh,
fan
thank
of
you.
this book. So,
Thank you. I'm glad.
speaking of fans, I want to ask you, how does it feel to know that you have this continuing fan base with the Fanny Fitzpatrick series?
Oh, it feels fantastic, obviously. I love that people really like these books and um I was at a book signing and I had a older woman come up to me and tell me how much she would have appreciated this book because she had polio when she was a kid and she had to be in a wheelchair for a while, and how much she would have appreciated having a book like that with a main character who uses a wheelchair. Um, and a bunch of kids at my daughter's school have read them and they really like them and they come up and tell me and they go, when's the next one going to come out? And I love it.
That's really awesome to hear that you're having these connecting moments with people who have read your works. And I think that's something that in previous interviews you talked about. One of the things that you really wanted to do was to have these books be something that people could connect to. And seeing that and having it be fruitful, does that help to motivate you and get you excited about writing the next book?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a big part of the motivation.
Yeah, that's great. Uh, and within this, with having these development of these stories and having it grow and develop from the younger presentation to slightly older but still within that sphere, do you think that you might continue this on into Fanny getting older and aging into perhaps even her teenage and more young adult years as time
You
goes
know,
on?
I've thought about that, and I think that would be something fun, and I definitely am interested in exploring that. I'm also interested in exploring Feather Island and the Sirens on there, because I think that some of those characters are worthy of having their own stories. And I almost feel like it would be fun to write an adult book about the adult Sirens, um, and what they're getting up to when summer camp's not in session. So it's a world that I like to be in and I like to write about. So, and I have a lot of other ideas that I might explore.
Yeah, so you're thinking of writing beyond just Fanny Fitzpatrick, but still within that world and that mythology that you've created.
Right.
I think that'd be really awesome to read some books that are kind of spin-offs, I guess you would say.
Yeah, spinoff.
And with that, I think the Sirens would be really interesting to read more about, and there's definitely a lot of room for that, right?
Yeah,
For other characters to kind of take the main stage.
for sure. Because they still have a mission. So
Mhm.
see how they do under, well, I don't want to give away too much, but yeah.
Yeah. Spoilers, spoilers.
Yeah.
And with the way that the direction is taken with it being more adult, did that have something where you kind of wondered if it was still appropriate? Did you think about changing it at all, or did it just kind of develop naturally and then you went, well, this works at the end of it?
There, I feel like I definitely still kept it age appropriate, but there were a few parts where I was like, okay, how do I make this, how do I convey that there's actual danger here while still keeping it kid friendly?
Mm,
Again, I don't want to give away any spoilers, but there are some parts in there that could have been written a lot darker if I'd really wanted to make them scary and more adult. But I tried to keep the darker aspects. I kind of tried to give them a light touch, give them a little bit, and I kept Fanny's attitude really upbeat throughout it, so it wasn't quite as as dark as it could have been. But that was a bit of a challenge for me. Yeah.
I can imagine that as someone who has experience with writing some of those darker things, that with The Cannibal's Guide to Fasting, that is an adult book that
Yeah.
addresses those darker themes, that sense of danger, a lot more directly than you can in
Yeah.
a children's book, right?
Right. Yeah. You don't have to be as careful with an adult book. You can take it as dark as you want.
Yeah, but here you kind of have to balance it to make sure
Yeah.
it doesn't go too far.
Right.
And so with doing that, is that something that you kind of foresaw happening as it developed, or is it something that you had to then go back and kind of rewrite some sections because you're like, oh, maybe that's too far.
Oh, I had to do that so much because, honestly, I consider myself to be a horror writer for the most part. So when I write kids stuff, I love doing it, but I always have to rein myself in. And I always have to go back and say, oh, okay, if I'm reading this as an 11-year-old or as the parent of an 11-year-old, am I okay with this? And I have, my own daughter, so I have to think of it from that perspective. Like, would I let her read this? So
Mm.
it's uh, it's a really good exercise in self-control. Um, but I think that I've learned a lot writing these kids' books, and I think it's been a good exercise for me.
I think that's awesome to hear. With it being an exercise for you and something that you've used to kind of improve in a way, would you say that it's also helped to improve your writing when you're working outside of the children's genre, even for some of your horror writing, for example, to refine it in some ways?
Um, I think so, especially because, for a lot of my other writing, I don't. I never really tried to keep it light, you know what I mean? And this has sort of taught me a different skill set that I didn't know that I had. Um, and it's been really fun to explore that.
Yeah, and do you think that lightness in a way, this is something that I'm speaking just from my own experience, having done a lot of reading and writing. Do you think that you might introduce some of that lightness even into your horror writing to kind of create a contrast that you might
For
not have done
sure.
before?
Especially because, like, I know, and I do write horror comedy, but the humor tends to be dark. It doesn't tend to be like the silly humor. But now I know that I can do the silly humor, so I might start incorporating some of that too, and maybe exploring some genres outside of horror. We'll see. We'll
That's
see.
awesome to hear. I think that's exciting to hear when you have this experience with writing that unlocks kind of the, in a sense, the confidence to be able to explore outside of what you consider to be your main genre. 'Cause you mentioned
Yeah,
you consider yourself to be a horror writer, but then you have now 3 books
yeah.
where it's in
It's not horror
children's.
at all.
It's not horror at all.
uh, and right now I'm working on a vampire romantic comedy, so I am definitely trying to incorporate more of that less horror, more light touch into my writing now, and it's going well. It's been really fun. So
I'm glad that you've been enjoying the experience, and I think that it's also awesome to hear that you're exploring all of these outside genres. And as someone who's been, reading your writing since the Campus Guide to Fasting and onward, seeing it develop has been a journey that I've enjoyed, and I'm sure that your fans will also have be in continue to enjoy and are currently enjoying as well.
hope so.
And so a question that we usually ask our authors is, do you feel like you've grown? I feel like we've covered that a little bit. And with that, do you feel like your writing has changed in a way that you feel is for the positive completely? Or do you feel like there are aspects that you're discovering about your writing where you feel like you might have discovered habits that you had that you're working to adjust?
Absolutely, I've grown as a writer. When I look at stuff I wrote, 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, I'm like, oh man, I could have done that so much better now. And I did have a lot of bad habits that I feel like I'm learning still, but I've learned how to control better. I do have a tendency to get a little off the plot and make things a little too wacky. Um, and so it's been a learning experience and really good for me to learn how to refine my writing and keep it so that it doesn't get so out there that it becomes off-putting to readers. So yeah, I'm working on it, but I've definitely improved from where I was.
That's really exciting. And to follow up on that, with the development of your writing and the improvement of it, the writing of different genres, do you still at your core consider yourself to be a horror writer, even though you're writing so much outside of it? Or has your identity as a writer changed with the writing that you've done?
You know, it's a hard question because I do consider myself first and foremost to be a horror writer and a horror fan. But that being said, I have had success writing other stuff and I've really enjoyed it as well. So maybe that rigid definition of myself needs to change. So um, I'm just a writer now, just a writer.
I think that's awesome to hear and exciting to hear that you're a writer and that you're going to leave already, but are going to continue exploring writing in multiple genres. So
For
I
sure.
definitely have enjoyed uh, the genres that you've written so far, and it's exciting to see where things are going to go next.
Thank you.
Speaking on things going next, when it comes to the Fanny Fitzpatrick world, do you currently have things in mind for Fanny Fitzpatrick as the main character for books, or you think you may be exploring other aspects? You mentioned the Sirens before, but maybe also the gods or perhaps other mythologies.
There are other gods in the Greek pantheon that I was considering bringing in possibly for future Fanny stories. Maybe a Cupid story would be fun. Um, I was thinking something with the Minotaur, and there are a few different gods that I would like to incorporate just to see how the other gods interact with them and how Fanny reacts with them, and maybe bringing her little, because she has a little brother now, maybe bringing the little brother into it when the brother gets a little bit older. Um, yeah, there's a lot of directions I could go with it. I have some rough outlines and notes, but I haven't started anything yet, so we'll see.
Yeah, that's exciting to hear. And I I hear the Minotaur, my head always perks up because I really love seeing different depictions of the Minotaur story.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
been so many of them, and seeing your creativity applied to that, especially with the world that you've created, I think would be really fascinating.
I
So
hope
that's
so.
just my vote. You hear my
Yeah.
vote. My vote's for the Minotaur. I'm excited
All
for
right.
anything, but I have a preference.
All right. Well, I'll take that into account.
Yeah. And so you've got now 4 books with us, and you're writing a vampire romance comedy as well.
Mhm.
Looking ahead with what you're writing, is your focus mostly on that vampire book that you're writing, or are you thinking of writing multiple different things? How's your writing progression, I guess, when it comes to writing books? Do you kind of dip back and forth between them?
Um, pretty much I don't work very well. I'm not a good multitasker, so I pretty much can only do one project at a time. The only thing that is sometimes I'll start something and realize it's not going the way I want to, and I'll just put it on the back burner and do something else. But yeah, I pretty much have to do one. So pretty much right now I'm just focusing on the one book, um, and we'll see how that goes.
Oh, yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. I also have with my experience with writing, I have a thing where if I don't keep myself locked into one, I just end up spiraling out of control.
Yeah, for sure.
You have all these ideas and you just want to follow all of them, but you never actually get anything done if you do it that way. It's kind of my
It's
experience, at
true,
least.
100%.
And so you're looking at doing the vampire book as your focus next, and with the progression with Fanny Fitzpatrick, I guess that's something that we can look forward to a bit later on then.
Yeah,
I think that's exciting to hear, and I'm excited for the release of Fanny Fitzpatrick and the Sirens.
me too.
And I know that your fans are too. You've met some of them and had that experience of talking with them as well. Uh, I wanted to ask a little bit about that as well. When it comes to meeting your fans, has that helped to spur your excitement and to make you feel more confident as a writer? What's the experience been like of meeting these people?
It's been great. That's my second favorite part of writing, is meeting the people who read it and getting to hear their thoughts on it. And I love doing book signings, and all that stuff is super fun.
That's awesome to hear. I'm really glad that it's been an enjoyable experience, and I'm sure that your fans are happy to hear that they can keep coming up to you and saying, "Hey, we're a big fan of your
Oh,
work."
of course. Yeah, never stop doing that. I love it.
Great. When it comes to the overall experience with writing, I guess uh, a question I have for you is, now that you've written these books and you've explored these other genres, looking back on the advice that you've given to writers in our previous interviews, do you have new advice that you might give to someone who's starting off with writing? Some new insight from the experience that you've had recently?
To someone who's starting,
Yeah, yeah. Or someone who's continuing and has gotten maybe their first couple books.
um, I wish I had something really interesting and profound to say, but mostly it's going to be the same advice that pretty much anyone would give you. Just keep doing it, even if it sucks. Um, Even if you feel like you're not good at it, you'll get good at it if you keep doing it. So, and don't be afraid of rejection. It's just part of the thing.
I think that's really sound advice. You say it's not profound, but I think it can always be helpful to hear it from the voice of someone who's been through it, right?
Yeah.
To to be told, hey, I've been where you're at. This is what
Yeah,
it's like. It
it
kind of
is true.
sucks, but you'll get there.
Yeah.
And with where you're at now, do you still have those experiences when you're writing where you're like, man, this sucks, but when I get through the other side of it, I'll be happy? Or is it mostly enjoyable now?
It's mostly enjoyable, but I mean, I think that any writer who says that every single thing they write is great is lying. Of course, I write things that I'm like, oh yeah, this isn't working at all. Um, and I try and catch it early, but sometimes I'll put a lot of time and effort into something and realize it's not working, and that's when it's rough.
Hmm.
But I think that, that's just part of it. Not everything that you write is going to be a winner, and that's okay. Just consider it practice.
I think that's also great advice to not necessarily commit to everything being the one, right?
Right. Not everything has to be a masterpiece.
Hmm. I think that's wonderful advice to take in, and something that I definitely struggled with when I was writing my book was really, really wanting to get it perfect, you know?
Yeah, the perfectionism will get in your way.
Yeah, yeah. And so we have the next book in the Fanny series of Fanny Fitzpatrick and the Sirens. It is coming out this year, February the 4th. And for all of our listeners, all of our beautiful moths, thank you for tuning in, listening to us talk with Dana about Fanny.
Yeah, you know.
and and thank you, Dana, for coming on again and talking with me and being on the Writer's Triangle.
Thank you for having me.
Can you tell everybody where they can find you as far as social media goes?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find me on my website, danahammer.com. I have a Facebook author page, which is just Dana Hammer author page. Technically, I'm on Instagram, but I rarely use it. So not the best way to contact me, but through my website is probably the best way.
That's wonderful to hear. And for all of our listeners, all our beautiful moths, be sure to visit cinnabarmoth.com where you can check out the transcripts and we'll have the links to all of Dana's social media. Dana, once again, thank you for coming on today. It's been a pleasure having you and talking with you once again.
Thank you.